We talk about, obviously, climate nonstop. And there's about 3 weeks to go until the start of COP27. That's going to happen in Egypt. And the need to urgently address the climate crisis has never been clearer. Pakistan and Nigeria have experienced devastating flooding this year. Europe, as you know, sweltering in a record heat wave over the summer. And Kenya and Somalia have been ravaged by a catastrophic drought, which makes you think about the big macro climate issues that are going on, and then how it impacts the investment climate.
And how do we measure climate impact? That's a big question, I think, that a lot of people have when it comes to not just their own companies, but also investments that they make. We've got Laura Zizzo with us. She's co-founder and CEO of Manifest Climate. It's a SaaS climate risk planning solution. She joins us on the phone from Atlanta this afternoon. Laura, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, we're doing well, thanks. Thanks for joining us on this. Can you explain what exactly Manifest Climate measures? What tools do you have and what data points do you use to measure climate impact?
Right. So we know that we're going through a climate transformation, just like we went through a digital transformation. But I say we're in this pre-HTML era of climate change. So we need a common language so we know how to navigate this climate transformation. And we think by pulling information from public disclosure of publicly traded companies, how they're talking about climate change, we can help understand how they're moving through that transformation. It's much more complex than just understanding their greenhouse gas emissions. It's about their processes and their policies of integrating these climate-related risks and opportunities into core business.
So can you be more specific? Like, give us for example, when this company talks about this, how that translates into data or, useful information on your platform.
Right, absolutely. So we know that some of our asset manager clients, for instance, are looking for proxies for good governance related to climate. So we'll look for things like how they're talking about what committees of the board are thinking about climate change, who's in charge from a C-suite or management level. And we can categorize all of this into action items and help organizations understand where they fit in their climate competency. So we're looking for specific language around what governance is the company have, how they're integrating risk management into core business strategy. So if you have an enterprise risk management strategy, how exactly are climate risks and opportunities identified and integrated into that?
So what do you mean?
For instance,
go ahead. I was going to say, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so if you're a real estate investment trust, for instance, like we've known for a long time that there's operational issues related to energy use. But we also need to think about how are you thinking about where these assets are located and what risks related to the climate impacts can be integrated. So are you thinking about future storm surge and how you're thinking about infrastructure improvements related to that? And are you talking about that with clarity so investors can feel like you've got your eye on this problem and you can think about how you're going to shore up resiliency into the future?
But do you think the market prices those things in from a real estate perspective? I think about that a lot because we hear about just, for the last year, so many people moving to Florida, for example, sky-high prices in California as well, a place that's really affected by a drought and a lack of water. And it doesn't seem like we know these things, but it doesn't seem like the market is pricing these things in.
Exactly. I think that's what organizations like Manifest Climate are trying to, the problem we're trying to solve. How do we actually connect the dots so that market can actually price this in and make better decisions? And investors are increasingly asking these kinds of questions. They need to understand how you're preparing for this long-term value creation. But I think that the answer is no right now. We're not adequately pricing this in. So we're seeing more and more tools out there to give that proxy for the price signals that we're looking for in the market.
Hey, Laura, so what do the companies that you work with or asset managers that you're working with do with this information? Is it how they base their investment decisions, or more broadly, how are they using the information ultimately?
Yeah, it's becoming a competitive advantage to understand this. So one of our asset manager clients says they're actually seeing alpha related to good governance disclosure. So it's not as simple as saying, these companies are the ones we're going to focus on, but they're looking for these sort of proxies for good governance. And they're also looking for clarity in the transition plans. We talked a lot about, are you thinking about how you're going to transition to net zero? We've seen a lot of ambition, right? We've seen people say,
totally.
Net zero by 2050. But they're looking for specifics like, what are you doing now? Is this more than lip service? Mm-hmm. And if there's a clear understanding of we're doing something right now, it's not good enough. No one's doing good enough on this. But we have something to say that's more than just ambition. That's what investors are looking for. And they're going to start holding these companies to some of their plans.
Can you give us a few companies that are doing this really well?
More and more, I would say Microsoft is a really great example. When they came out with their carbon pledge, they said, we really want to think about how our business will help transition. And I always say this is not philanthropic on their part, right? Like they see this as a business opportunity. The Bank of America just said, and I heard right before the segment, you're talking about the Bank of America, they're saying there's $130 trillion that needs to move as we get to net zero. So companies like Microsoft say, we need to be part of that transition. How can we help move to that net zero future? And they actually have a business strategy aligned with that. So that's the type of things that investors are looking for.
No, it's definitely a part of, you feel like increasingly so because of the impact climate change is having on our world, the costs, that it definitely is having a bigger say, if you will, and having some kind of platform that can identify it really makes a lot of sense. Hey, Laura, thank you so much. Laura Zizzo, co-founder, chief executive officer of Manifest Climate. They work with companies to track and report on climate change. Laura, by the way, a former delegate to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. She's also a lawyer, so good to catch up with her. But this is, I could just see more momentum around what she was talking about.
Once again, though, I go back to the example that you and I talk about, that we're in earnings season right now, investors don't punish companies necessarily for their environmental impact right now. No. We talk about bottom line, we talk about top line, and we see shares of a company move as a result of those reports, but we don't hear about carbon output, for example.
No, exactly, right? And unless you're penalized, like you do wonder, I don't know, how it really plays out in the public markets.